Video. We don't need no stinking video. Hey, I tell you what, it is great to be here with each and every one of you on a very beautiful Sunday. The Sunday before our 236th anniversary of the greatest nation in the world. I want to thank my wife Angela for joining me, and my youngest daughter Austin. Our oldest daughter is in Texas with her grandparents. Two great chairmen of the Treasure Coast up here, Susan All down in Martin County and Bill Patterson up here in St. Lucie County for all that they're doing, all their hard work, and to each and every one of you who are here today. Because what you proved in 2010 is the thing that upsets the folks that are out there with the signs. You proved to them that we can have a better grassroots, a better ground game than they did, and that's what I want to start off by talking about yesterday. Yesterday morning I had a great opportunity to be at a special event. It was the first annual Navy SEAL Aaron Vaughn Memorial Frogman Swim. Aaron Vaughn was a Navy son. Aaron Vaughn was a Navy SEAL who lost his life in the Chinook helicopter shoot down last year in Afghanistan. And so what we did was we gathered on the beach at Jensen Beach, and to remember him, but also to remember the legacy of the original frogman, who first trained just right up the road here in Fort Pierce. And so we jumped into those chilly waters, and I can tell you, that water was chilly yesterday. And there were three different races. There was a 200, 1K and a 5K. And me being an Army guy, I was not going to try to swim 5 kilometers in the open ocean. But we have sharks too. And I'm quite sure that the TC Palm was waiting to run that headline, Congressman Allen West is found at the bottom. A lot of people may have been happy about that. But as we jumped into that water, we thought about the brave men and women through the years who have stood up to serve, to sacrifice, to commit to the greatness of this country, to the principles that make this country unique and exceptional. And one of those we remembered yesterday. And as you listen to his sister talk, and she talked about Psalms 144:1, which is a piece of scripture that's right here on my dog tags. You listened to his father and talked about the commitment that his son had, not just to this country, but also to God. And where he got that from was from his mother and father. You listened to his grandparents speak, and you had the connection and understood that Aaron may not be walking on the earth with us, but he is still with us. He is watching over this great nation. He is going to a place where all of those great warriors who have gone before us go, to make sure that those of us that still remain will one day see them. But they keep charge over us to make sure that we honor the legacy that they left behind. Now, I can stand here today and we can talk about a whole plethora of things that are troubling not just this country, but also troubling the Treasure Coast. When we think about the tax policies that are causing so many closed storefronts, when you drive up Dixie Highway or Federal Highway, all throughout St. Lucie Boulevard, down on Canner Highway, when you think about the regulatory environment that is affecting this country, and I talked about that in a special order speech just this past Friday, how it's strangling our businesses. Susan just talked about the regulation on washing machines. There are regulations out there that are trying to control the amount of water that go into urinals. This is an overreach of the federal government. We can talk about our monetary policy, how we continue to monetize our debt. We print more money to buy up the debt, the almost $16 trillion of debt that we have in the United States of America. And yes, last year I signed up as a co-sponsor to audit the Fed, and we will be voting on that. We can talk about how we can reform our tax code. Because as you remember back in 1913, when we changed our tax policy from one of consumption-based to production-based, a All of a sudden, we went from taxing people on what they were buying to taxing people on what they were producing, their hard work, their labor. That income tax was supposed to be temporary, and it was never supposed to go higher than 6 or 7%. But now we find ourselves in a situation where the tax code in the United States of America is being used as a weapon against the American people. It's being used for behavior modification. That is exactly what came from the Supreme Court decision last week. A federal government that now believes that if they know more and better about how to run your life, that they can influence how you run your life by penalizing you through taxes. The president said it wasn't a tax. People said it was a penalty. But the Supreme Court has ruled this a tax. And isn't it an unconscionable thing that now we live in a country where the federal government can tax you for not taking an action? What will be next? If you don't buy a certain type of green card, they will tax you. If you don't buy a certain type of food, they will tax you. Well, I got a great idea. I believe for personal security, every American should go out and have to buy a Glock 9mm. And if you don't do it, we'll tax you. Now, I wonder how the liberals will feel about that. But that is the precedent that has been established in the United States of America. The United States of America, where this country was began because of onerous tax policy. This country was began because of the intrusive nature of government. This country was began because of the invasive nature of the British Empire, King George III and his policies. And it is funny how in 236 years, it seems that we have come full circle once again. That is the lesson that those 5 justices have taught us in the decision that they made last week. It is now up to the American people to decide who will be truly the voice in this country. Who will determine what is best for you? Will we continue to go down the path where people believe that the best thing in this country is economic dependence or economic freedom? Here in the Treasure Coast, you have close to 45,000 that are on food stamps, and that's growing. If you've been paying attention to the farm bill that is being debated in the Senate right now, 80% of that farm bill is food stamps. In the year 2002, the federal government per year spent $20.6 billion on food stamps. Today, the federal government spends $75.8 billion on food stamps. And this new farm bill will take that to $80 to $81 billion. And even when some people in the Senate tried to bring up legislation that peeled it back $20 billion to bring it down to about 60, unfortunately, there were even Republicans that voted against that. This is not about party. It is about principle. And it is about understanding one of those principles. It is about understanding what limited government really is and what fiscal responsibility is. My mother taught me a very simple lesson. She said, self-esteem comes from doing esteemable things. Sitting at home and getting a check from the government is not going to help your self-esteem. What it will do is make you an economic slave to a bunch of people in a far, far distant place. This country was established believing in individual, their sovereignty, their rights, their freedom, not collective subjugation, not this emphasis on dividing us based upon race and gender, socioeconomic status, or whatever they can try to find out just to make sure that they can retain power over each and every one of us. If we don't reestablish the preeminence of the American citizen, the American individual, if we don't reward the American citizen and individual for their own industrialism, for their innovation, for their ingenuity, for their investment, I find it very odd that the president and liberals all of a sudden want to talk about government investments. The question I have for them, what's the rate of return on the government investment? investment for the future of this country comes from the people that I'm looking at. You're the ones that are going to open up those closed storefronts. We have to set the conditions with the right type of tax reform and regulatory reform. We have to make sure that things like the Dodd-Frank, which is killing small community banks, which is the lifeblood for our small businesses, must be repealed. And therefore we can go back and we can reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act, which creates a separation between commercial banking and investment banking. We believe in the free market. We believe in private enterprise. We believe in that exchange of ideas that has made the United States of America in 236 years the greatest economic engine that the world has ever known. We don't believe in crony capitalism. We don't believe in a government that goes out and decides who the winners and losers are going to be in the marketplace. Government should not be a venture capitalist. Funny thing that when President Obama talks about Governor Mitt Romney sending jobs out of the United States of America, well, he needs to look in the mirror and see how many jobs he sent out of the United States of America. Corporate business tax rate in the world at 39.6%. If we don't lower that corporate business tax rate, if we don't eliminate some of those exemptions, we will never see people that are willing to come back here to the United States of America, allow a one-time repatriation of all the trillions of dollars of capital that is offshore, to come back here to the greatest place where you can live, work, and play, raise a family, right here in the Treasure Coast. We need to have more of those businesses coming here for research and development so that we can get our people to work right here in the Treasure Coast. Unfortunately, we have a president that has a sign up that says America is not open for business. Because with his tax policies, obviously he does not understand that small business owners operate from a personal income tax rate. So when you want to raise those personal income tax rates, the top brackets, from 33% up to 37%, from 35% to 39.6%, you're talking about affecting the very people that are the economic engine of this country. Why? It's very simple. He does not want you to have the self-esteem of getting up and earning and having that title of American. He'd rather you be his slave and be economically dependent upon him. We have farmers and we have ranchers here in this beautiful Treasure Coast. Think what it means for them to hear about the death tax that will go from 35% to a 55% bracket. To hear about the minimum exemption level that will go from 5 million down to 1 million. What will that do to pass on to the next generation of farmers and ranchers, where we already have third, fourth, fifth generations? What will it do to investment in America when we know the capital gains will go from 15% to 25%? What will it do to our seniors when we know that dividends taxes will go from 15% to 43.4%? And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? When you really peel the onion back on the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Chief Justice Roberts told us what many of us already knew. It is nothing more than a tax bill. And that is exactly why they are asking for 16,000 new IRS agents to help them implement all the new taxes. You know, when they're sitting around and they're arguing, going back and forth about college education loans and interest rates, no one had the time to sit and read that the federal government nationalized college education loans, and the federal government under the Obama administration, Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, took those college education loans up to 6.8%. Thank God on Friday we voted to bring them back down to 3.4%. You know, a lot of people are talking now about how gas prices are going down. But is it a matter of gas prices going down, or we're seeing a weak economy? We're seeing a drop in demand. We're seeing people that are concerned about getting out and driving. No, the simple fact is this. On Inauguration Day of January 2009, the average price of gasoline in this country was $1.84. Even if it is an average of $3.59 or 61 cents, that's still about a 97 to 98% growth. But yet, when you look at Lisa Jackson, what they want to do, when you look at the Keystone XL pipeline, we don't have an administration, we don't have people on the other side of the aisle that really want to see full spectrum development of all the energy resources we have here in the United States of America. We have an environmentalist in chief that would rather pander to the environmental lobby than to do what is best for the United States of America, which is truly make us energy independent, to allow us to take advantage of all the great resources that God has blessed the United States of America with. And if you don't believe that, look at what is happening up in North Dakota with the Bakken oil fields. Look at the fact that their unemployment rate is between 3 to 3.5%. Look at how much money a high school graduate up there in North Dakota is able to make. Why? Because they took advantage of the resources they had on their state and private lands, even though a federal government tried to bring lawsuits against them. Look at what is happening here in the state of Florida, where the EPA has brought a lawsuit against us for numeric nutrient criteria, which basically tells us in Florida, our farmers and our local municipalities, that they must have runoff water, wastewater that is parts per billion purer than rainwater. And when the state of Florida went to challenge them on the science behind that, they couldn't even prove the science. But it's all because there's something about this state that they want to crush. This is not how we turn it around in our country. And lastly, we've got to protect you. The world is a far dangerous place. When you think about what is going on in China, did you read the papers today? The people in Hong Kong, the 15th anniversary, they're rioting under the rule of the Chinese. You think about what is happening in North Korea, all across the Maghreb, Northern Africa, Boko Haram in Nigeria. 16 Christian Kenyans were killed by Al-Shabaab, Islamic terrorists coming down out of Somalia. We know what's happening in Yemen. Who would have thought 2 weeks ago, the radical Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood, now are in control of the most populous Arab nation, that is Egypt. A year ago, there were some of us that said, beware of the Muslim Brotherhood. Who will fill the void? And everyone said, you guys are alarmists. Calm down. Have you all read the charter of the Muslim Brotherhood? And see what it says. The Muslim Brotherhood, who said they were not going to run a presidential candidate, but yet they did, and he won. And now, the greatest ally that we have, the most staunch friend that we have in the Middle East, finds itself completely surrounded. Hezbollah in the north in Lebanon. Hamas in the Gaza Strip, constantly firing rockets and missiles. Egypt now in a state of flux, and already you see terrorist attacks coming out of Sinai. Iraq, where there's a void of leadership, and Iran, of course, who has their targeted eye. And we know that in Syria, on one side you have Russia, Bashar al-Assad, and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. On the other side, you have freedom fighters that we don't know who they are. We have Al-Qaeda, and we have Turkey. And in between that is this shiny little beacon of liberty, freedom, and democracy. A small replication of the United States of America called the modern-day state of Israel. And if we don't stand, stand for Israel, then what does it say about us? For as they say, that is the little Satan, and we are the greater Satan. Now is the time when we need leadership that will unequivocally state our direct relationship and our support to Israel, as well as to the Coptic Christian community in Egypt. If you go back and look at the speech that this president gave at the University of Cairo some years ago, you can see that this administration shows weakness, not strength. They have abandoned that three simple words that Ronald Reagan gave us, peace through strength, so that now the United States is no longer seen as a leader in this world. As it said, we lead by following. which is a horrible thing for this country. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a time when you all must understand what it is that you believe in, what you want to pass on to your children and grandchildren, to the subsequent generations. That is what America has always been about. And it is also about honoring and remembering our traditional cultural values, the strength of our family. You know, it hurts my heart when I think about Angela and I represent that which is only 28% in the black community. A husband and wife in a home raising children. I can tell you that even though I was born and raised in the inner city of Atlanta, men and women were there raising their kids. And that's why you have that breakdown. That's why you have here, in such a place as St. Lucie County, 10.9% unemployment, far higher than the national average. We have got to rebuild the family. We have got to look out for the innocent lives in this country. Those are the things that I believe in. That is what enables me to stand here today. Because the lesson that my parents taught me is very simple. A man must stand for something, or else he'll fall for anything. And in standing, maybe that does upset some people in the media or what have you. But as those of you who have been in the Air Force, and definitely those who have been in the military, we have a saying. You only take flak when you're over the target. So I will continue to fly over the target. I will continue to drop bombs on them. Let me clarify, because I know someone's going to say, he doesn't drop bombs on our heads. He's a cruel person. This is on the ideological battlefield. We have to stand up for the principles that made America great. Now, this is what I want to do, because this is a special time for us. 236 years ago, a great man was given an incredible task. And he sat somewhere, and he started to write a document that would transform the world. A document that would say that there will be a nation that will be started that was based not upon the monarchical rule of one, but the consent of the government. It will be a country that would be founded on a principle of individual liberty and sovereignty, not on collective subjugation. He sat down in 2 short days, penned the thing that we're going to celebrate later this week, called the Declaration of Independence. And I think one of the problems that we have in this country, one of the reasons why we have the people out there with the signs protesting, is Americans stopped reading the Declaration. Americans stopped reading the Federalist Papers. Americans stopped reading the United States Constitution. Well, today it changes. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I want to conclude by reading you the Declaration of Independence. In Congress, July the 4th, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are most disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government, to provide new guards for the future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having a direct object, the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of people. He has refused for a long time, after such disillusions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining, in the meantime, exposing to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing his judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment for their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices, we call that czars today, and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept amongst us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their own country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their own hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us. And he has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time